And we're live, but I think our guest has dropped off. And
Goodness,
we're
goodness.
back.
I think she's back. I think she's back.
I mean, I know it's nighttime over here, but that's a bit extreme.
It's all good. We are
So,
live. Over to you, Joel.
our final live of season 3. Don't worry, there is a season 4. You know this, Mac. I've told you several times. And today we are joined by Sydney Butler on this episode, which I don't actually recognize the title of because I think ChatGPT reworded it. But I know Mac, while I'm trying to familiarize myself with that title, I know Mac is
Taking on
bursting.
the world as a neurodivergent.
Yes, that wasn't the original title. so, um, so
It's all good.
I will pass it over to Mac because I think he's bursting to say things instead of something else. So over to Mac.
Awesome stuff. Well, we are finally live, and I'm finally getting to speak to Sydney live as well. Sydney, where are you joining us from today? And give us a little bit of insight into how you and Joel connected.
Yes, so I'm calling from Canada. So it is 3 o'clock. It's the afternoon for me where I am. I believe you guys are 5 hours ahead. And it's funny, I think me and Joe connected like many different times through different avenues. So first, I think someone else connected us on LinkedIn, then we connected on LinkedIn, and then kind of just connected, didn't really continue conversation because we're busy individuals. And then invited me to Rockstar X events numerous times. And then finally, my friend, I think our mutual friend David, who lives in the UK, connected us. And he's like, I think you'd be a really good guest on this podcast and to really connect with Joel. And so then that was finally the third time's a charm, as they say. And me and Joel finally actually connected.
Awesome stuff. I'm just getting used to my earphones now because I've changed them, but at least they don't sound as bad as they were when we were the kind of pre-stage. Now you've done, or at least from your banner on LinkedIn, it looks like you've done quite a bit of your public speaking on neurodiversity as well. And for those who don't know you, because if you go and look on your LinkedIn profile, it talks about your neurodiversity and disability employment that you're involved in as
Mhm.
well. Um, and I want to know a little bit more about accessible creates because that's one of the things that you
Yes.
um, is kind of one of your main roles. Is that right?
Yes, correct.
Okay, so how does that fit in, and explain to us how neurodiversity kind of came on your radar and where it all began, if that's
That,
okay.
that's a long story. I'll keep it short. Long story short. But I had to when I was younger, when I was 6 years old, I had to start getting speech therapy because I would speak too fast, couldn't say my R's properly, and all these different things. And didn't know that was different. Knew I needed to leave class sometimes to get speech therapy. Or in the summer times, I had a speech therapist come to the house. I was like, "What do you mean I can't go ahead?" Like, no, you have to do your speech therapy first. And walked on my tippy toes, all these different things, and didn't really know what they meant. I just knew it was me being me. And then I knew when I would get support, I would be, doing better at certain things. And when I wasn't getting that support, I would be struggling. And so then I lost that support in high school and became more aware of my depression and realized in the masking. And I called myself, I was chameleon in high school. Like I was like with the jocks, with the nerds, I was all over the place. And I didn't realize it was masking at the time. So I was like, I'm just a chameleon. And then started working with kids that are autistic, have ADHD, have other disabilities, and became more aware of, I'm like, oh, okay. And so, but at the same time, I was in school for human resources, and again realized that my classmates in all my life, my classmates felt different from me, but I couldn't. I had classmates who were similar, obviously, but the majority would felt different, and I felt like an alien compared to them. And so I was like, oh. And so when I was studying human resources at school, we talked about accommodation in one day in my employment law class. And I was, well, obviously, like, I was coming to terms with my disabilities, my neurodivergence. And I was like, well, obviously, we have to accommodate people with disabilities in the workplace and that have, different way of thinking. And my classmates, they're about to enter the HR field, or somebody working in human resources, and so you just need this education to back them up. And they were like, nope, we don't want to accommodate people with disabilities, shouldn't be in the workplace, all these things. And so I then graduated in 2020. And some people are now talking about the importance of digital accessibility, but we're not really talking about invisible disabilities and non-apparent disabilities and even just regular apparent disabilities. And so I realized that it was time to come with who I am and also leverage my experiences that I've experienced as someone that's also racialized, and really bring these things to light of really helping the world and businesses as a whole become more inclusive to people with disabilities and that may experience neurodivergence.
Sure. So, I picked up quite a few things there, and you speak about the support you had early on in schooling,
Mm-hmm.
and then you went through a stage without support, and
Yes.
then you had support again, and then going into the workplace, but also seeing in the workplace that there isn't the right levels of support
Mm-hmm.
for people, when it comes to neurodiversity. So you've been through both sides of the challenges,
Yes.
the
Yeah.
personal challenges facing that yourself, as well as the system that is there that
Yes.
you've got to face, and then there's the parental side of things as well. But you've pretty much had it full on from both ends. And would you say, from where you're at the moment, that over the last, since school to now,
Mm-hmm.
you're seeing things improve in general, or are you still finding that the more and more you learn,
Mm.
the more you start unraveling challenges all over the place?
I think it's kind of a mix. I think in certain industries and in certain places in the world, that the rare head and rare fan and the other people and other companies in other places that are so far behind, and so there's more challenges. And so I've been lucky enough to consult with, through my company at Accessible Creates, to consult with global companies, and that's very interesting because, for example, again, I'm based in Canada, and so the Canadian part of the company is like, we have to do this, inclusion, all these things, and then they have headquarters in, let's say, a place in Asia. And so then they're like, what do you mean? No, we don't want to. And so just knowing that, and knowing even within its own internal company, there can be such differences. And so there has been a lot of progress, and a lot of people are now talking about it, talking about their own experiences. That's so important. People are recognizing where they fit into the puzzle to fight this fight and to bring it up. And so I think that's the biggest change I've seen since graduating, is that people are more vocal about their experiences and more wanting to really come up with solutions and to want to collaborate. I think too, a lot of people, we can't do this work in silos. We have to work together across the world to really bring this work forward and really continue this momentum, because I think right now is such a crucial time.
It really is, and it's interesting. I love the fact that you've touched base on the international side of things, because
Mm-hmm.
as we through many conversations Joel and I
Yes.
have had over the last 2 or 3 years, as we start having this conversation with more and more people around neurodiversity, and neurodiversity and
Mm-hmm.
inclusion in the workplace, empowering, enabling the environments for people. Um, you know, we forget sometimes the progress we make in places like Canada, or here in the
Mm-hmm.
UK, or in the US, and then you speak to somebody who's based in, somewhere in Asia or somewhere in Africa, and you all of a sudden realize, it's almost like you're taking a step back 10 years in time,
Yeah.
because they're only starting to get exposed to some of the things that we've all seen, years ago. So the world is at so many different levels when it comes to understanding neurodiversity, and then having support structures in place. There's still a lot of countries where there's a massive stigma around it. People don't really talk about it. And that reminds me of, I guess, the 80s, 90s, where anybody with any, that was slightly different got put, like, wasn't even put in mainstream schools. And it was, there were all these weird names that they used to call people like ourselves that have, either ADHD or dyslexia or, autism. And the more and more we get to understand it, the more we realize that actually it's like, I love Joel's analogy of, it's Xbox versus PlayStation. It's just different programming. So, it's learning to play the game in a different way.
Yes.
So, Joel, what questions do you have for Sydney, and what are your thoughts so far?
Well, first of all, Mark, it's not just undeveloped countries that are new to this concept, new to this word, let alone the concept. I think that a large majority of the Western world also is new to the word neurodiversity. And certainly over here, they're still wondering what the heck that is. They think it's some kind of illness or something like that because they haven't heard of it. But and that comes down from the power of the day, really. Not quite sure what it's like in Canada or the US, but over here it's still very limited, funded, limited resource, limited, and certainly limitations to understanding, or perhaps not wanting to understand in some cases.
Yes. Yeah, I think words are always evolving, and I think, like, for example, I myself am still learning. And, like, yes, I'm passionate about this topic, and I myself identify as neurodivergent. But it's also, I read different articles and I read different points of view, and I think there's no set collective definition, and I think that's part of the problem. And it just, because it's so vast and there's so many things encompassed, like, so, and I read an article, and neurodiversity also includes neurotypical, and then you talk to some other people and it doesn't include neurotypical, right? Because it's like, oh, we're all neurodiverse, we all have different brains, and some people think, no, the neurodiversity is just for people that are neurodivergent. And so who's to say who's correct, right? And because, like you said, Joel, there's so limited research done in this area, and it is so complex. And I feel like maybe at the end of my lifetime, we're finally going to maybe figure out the definition. But even then, I hope it continues to evolve and grow, to consider Asian perspective, consider African perspective, continue having an international approach to what this word means and what this work actually means, right? And how because now, even like last year, people, like, for diversity, equity, inclusion, people focused on diversity. They wanted diverse people in their organization. Now they want inclusion for people, and so now people are also saying neuro inclusion instead of neurodiversity. And so there's so many nuances.
There is, and the umbrella is now becoming a little bit on the large side. To be called now an umbrella, more like a tent.
I was going to say tent.
I was having a rather interesting conversation on my YouTube channel with a very famous singer from who had his breakthrough finally in the German band Accept, and he has OCD, which is also in this large tent. It's almost we're almost living within in a world within the world within the world.
Yes.
I think it's getting to a stage where it, as you say, Sydney, about the complexity that, when you're having different discussions between, and I say experts in inverted commas,
Mm-hmm.
because there's different, as you pointed out, different levels of expertise with, all the different organizations and institutions around the world, that almost before you start a discussion, you almost have to level the playing field so that you can understand that everybody is actually on the same page before you start the discussion. So you can't just
Mm-hmm.
assume that other people are, on the same page as yourself when it comes to the understanding of, neurodiversity or neurodiversity and inclusion, and
Mm-hmm.
all these different terms that people are using. There's nothing obvious about it at this stage. So there's a lot of education to be done, and the more we talk about it, the more we can get to a universal language that everybody gets to really understand.
Mm-hmm.
So Sydney, through the work that you do, what are some of the areas of progress that you have seen within the services that you provide,
Mm-hmm.
and companies being open to looking at that and supporting their staff and their employees in a better way?
Yeah, I think that human resources is becoming more understanding that of the accommodation and actually supporting people, and having that training and that education also brought in for their managers and the people leaders. And so really looking at, okay, if they know, there's parents that have neurodivergent children or disabled children. And so they might be now diagnosed later in their life. Now they're like, oh, I have a son, I have a daughter that has ADHD. So now I think I might have that experience as well. And so they're now almost seeing the employees as full people. I think previously sometimes it was just like, okay, you're here to do a job, just do the job. Don't really need to know anything else about you. And but really want to make a workplace a place where people can bring themselves to work, because we spend so much time at work in a day, in a week, in a year. And so really having things in place to really support those employees. And also now looking at policies and procedures to see, for example, where I live in the province in Canada called Ontario. We have the AODA, which is an accessible act for disabilities. And so previously, it came out 20 years ago in 2005, which is wild. And so it was basically set out to make our province fully accessible. And when it first came out, it was primarily for people with physical disabilities, but they brought it back a couple of times to the table to really also include people that have non-apparent disabilities and have neurodivergent conditions. And so now they have to have that policy in the organizations, but they're also realizing that that's just the bare minimum to be compliant with legislation. They're looking at, okay, how can we go beyond that? I help them with coming up with accommodation policies, accessibility policies, and from both those perspectives of, okay, how can, although like sometimes companies, they have an accommodation process, but they don't document it until the employees don't know. So, did they take a step back? Do our employees know that we can actually accommodate them? What are the parameters for them being accommodated, versus being supported? And because again, previously it was this medical accommodation, having to have that doctor's note. It still very much is, but it's also like, okay, how can we support this person? Okay, do we have now having quiet rooms on site, having that as an accommodation, having remote work as an accommodation, and just having all these different things that are now kind of like on a menu. So we say an accommodation menu of, okay, these are what is offered, but it's also, if these do not feel like they're a good fit with you, or you can try them. Really personalizing that approach as well to the employee. I think previously companies, like, these are the options and that's all you get. And realizing now, okay, maybe that might have worked for Sally, but it's not going to work for Bob, right? And so instead, giving Bob what he needs to be successful in his job.
So, we've spoken about this at some length, because I go as far as to say, even regionally within countries, there are differences. In the US and different states, there's different levels of understanding, different levels of acceptance, and we've had people that have listened to some of our talk shows then reach out afterwards and go, well, it's nice that you talk about this, but my company isn't as forthcoming. Or, how do I go about finding the support? I didn't know that this type of support is available. So when you talk about accommodations, as an example, what are you finding when it comes to employees and the stigma around just even asking for those accommodations? You spoke about masking earlier, and both Joel and I know that very well. And it's exhausting.
Yeah, it is.
But as neurodivergents, we, that masking becomes a second nature, and it's our minds have to work twice as hard as somebody else, because of the additional masking that we're doing, trying to fit in with the norm, as it were. So what are you finding with regards to individuals who may know that there's accommodations, but then taking that up and stepping forward and being comfortable enough to know that they're not going to be either judged, or it's they're not potentially going to lose their jobs because they now are asking for additional help?
Yeah, it's hard. I have, for example, I also have coaching clients. I started doing that last year, to really, because again, from the HR background, knowing how to talk to human resources, the accommodation lens, and it's a matter of survival. Kind of, I think you're getting at, Mac, and I think really understanding, does it make sense to actually ask for that accommodation, and knowing, because I think again it's the lack of understanding of what can you ask for that organization, and so it's really on the organization to have that transparency with the employees. It's like you can have and realizing as well that, and also could include other things, because in some companies they're like, oh, we said they could have this. I'm like, did you say and more, or and etc. Prefer to ask, right? Because sometimes you take things really, I don't want any of these things. I guess I can't have accommodation. And so, and I remember the company was like, oh, we never thought of it like that. We thought we were doing so well by saying they can have transcriptions, or they can have all these, they can have go to the quiet room, right? But I was like, did you say they could have a 5-minute break, and walk away from the computer, or walk away from the
things that
desk,
actually make an impact for the
right?
individual.
And so really working on, like, yes, it's good that you have, again, that selection menu, but at the end of the day, really working with an employee, and also having all staff trainings for your employees to know about what does it actually mean to support neurodiversity and disability in the workplace. What is it? And then when the employee sees that you're doing that, it's not the total solution, but it's the first step in the right direction. Okay, maybe my company is actually not just talking the talk, but walking the walk, starting the process of, really caring about this stuff, and being transparent as managers, people leaders, that you're trying your best, and also expecting that from the employee, and really fostering that relationship and that culture. And I think sometimes understanding that things take time, and that we're so, like you said, we're so used to masking. It's second nature. And so sometimes because, for example, you masked at another company, like, oh, to keep that job for as long as I did, I had to mask, right? And so, but carry that over to this new company. And so knowing all the things and educating yourself on issues that we experience both in employment and day-to-day life, and realizing, okay, what part can I play in reducing some of that stigma, reducing some of that harm, and also acknowledging that previous workplace trauma or other traumas that might contribute to that as well. And so it's very complex, and realizing that accommodation and adjustments and all the supports are there. You want the employee to do the best of their ability at work. And so, having the employee also know, we want you to do the best of your ability. If that requires you to have an accommodation, let us know, right? And so really also being transparent about what are the goals that you want for both the organization and that employee to succeed.
Sure. So I heard quite a bit there.
It's a lot.
But a few things stood out, because as you speak about the complexity of the whole landscape, as it were, but the simplicity that I heard comes down to, that little bit of communication between the employee and the employer, and just listening as to what the accommodation is, rather than assumption, which is what a lot of organizations do, because they err on the side of caution, so they end up doing a lot, but because they're doing, it's, as an example, offering access to gym membership that includes swimming to all your staff when half of them can't swim, and you think you're doing them a favor. So it's similar to that with regards to the accommodations. Like you say, when you're offering accommodations that may work for one individual as a blanket cover for everybody who needs accommodations, as opposed to realizing that the individual may not need all these additional accommodations, they just need a slightly different accommodation to be able to really help with their productivity and making it comfortable at work. So that's the human element that I think it comes back to. People are worried about AI and all these things that now coming into the workplace, but I think that's one thing that we all need to just take a step back and realize we're working with human beings here, and that communication is so vital to understand and listen to what those accommodations are. It doesn't have to be very complicated in most cases. Is that,
yeah, it was fun.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. And it was fun. So I did a training at the end of last year for this charity in Canada, and I was talking about accommodation, the slide for the people leaders. And because again, I'm an external trainer coming in, I can only know so much about the company. And I was like having AI notes in your meetings. Like, oh yeah, we do that already. I'm like, perfect. And I'm like, oh, well, and so I asked them, I was like, how to talk about when an employee asked, and like the tools there, because there's some AIs that aren't approved, the AI note takers, and they're like, so they found one that they could get approved for their company and actually implemented that. And so now people that go to the meetings can have those notes. I'm just like, see, that's how it should be.
But this is the thing, is when companies are open to suggestions of improvements that work for for everybody in some way, that is enabling the environment for everybody. Because I know a couple of years ago we were doing a project where we were doing especially during the COVID period, everything was online. And I was working with organizations where one individual actually was hearing impaired. So going onto Zoom rooms was just an absolute nightmare for him, because everybody was trying to talk at the same time, and it was very disruptive. And just being able to put captions on made a huge difference for him. So he just turned the sound off and had captions, and he was happy. And his work environment changed, and he wasn't frustrated and getting angry and upset and frustrated. But again, it comes down to that one word: listening. Just organizations being open to suggestions and listening.
And open to change as well.
Well, our world is always changing. That's one of the things.
No, open to change, not choosing to.
No, well, what I'm saying is it's the one thing that human beings are afraid of is change. Yes, it's the only constant. So, Sydney, what type of organization? I mean, how do you get involved with organizations? Is it generally through employees that you end up going in, or is it organizations that are adopting change and then inviting you in, or are you having to go to organizations and explain that they need this service? How does it all come about, and how have you been
Yeah,
impacted your role?
it's been interesting. So when I first started, I was like, does anyone need this service? Like I was just like shouting it to the rooftops. And then I think by speaking at a lot of events, either paid or free events, we're doing free virtual events. People have found me that way. I remember last year, actually, like around this time last year, a company that I've always wanted to work for, like it's back of my brain, that's actually based in the USA, reached out to me saying, I saw your talk at this virtual event and, really resonated and connected with it. We would like to have you come do a training in October for Disability Employment Awareness Month. And, that was because sometimes I do these virtual events, and I'm so grateful to do those virtual events and, get my name out there and get my voice out there and even just have these different opportunities. And so sometimes it's kind of like a slow burn. It's just like, you want hopefully to get clients from it, but if you don't, that's okay. People still reach out to me on LinkedIn saying, thank you for your talk. And I'm like, that's enough for today. I'm still having an impact, right? And then someone reaches out like 6 months later and wants me to come now train another like 8 months later. And so planting those seeds is so important. And I think planting those seeds authentically that makes sense for me. And so what works for me might not work for other people, that, to get your clientele, having a lot of collaboration with other companies and other people that are doing similar work, because there's a lot of people doing this work now, which is amazing, but we all have our niche within this space. And again, there's so much work to be done that we all have our part to play. Like, okay, I can do the auditing of the policies, but I can do the training, but if I know someone else that can do it better and that's really passionate about doing the trainings, I'll bring them in for that, right? And vice versa. And so really also building a network of collaboration rather than competition. And I think sometimes people network, but they unintentionally are creating competition for themselves, and they don't, or they think networking, especially as neurodivergent individuals, is so tiring and draining. And I think, okay, do I have to go to a networking event in person? And for example, sometimes when I have to network in person, I have to take the train down to another city, and it takes a lot of energy from me, but I'm like, is it going to be worth it? And so doing that calculation, okay, who am I networking with then? Who do you think I can meet? Who can I actually continue having conversations with, even at that event itself? And how can we best conserve our energy around networking? I remember I started networking in 2020 during the pandemic. And I had a friend, and he's like, I'm like, oh, are you networking? Because we both graduated. And so I was like, are you networking? Are you getting out there virtually? But he identifies as neurotypical. He's like, no, I want to be in person to network, but we can't in person network right now. I was like, what do you mean? This is the dream. Get to go on a call, network with people around the world, and then I can go cuddle my new COVID puppy. Like it's beautiful.
Yeah.
And that worked for me, right? And so knowing what works for you and what doesn't work for you, and having a network that really knows what you do and what you offer, and also you vibe with as an individual, and really trust them to, come back to you. The time is right, or, connect you with the right people, but also just having that genuine human connection, being like, I like you. I like what you do. You like what I do. And I think instead of having a huge network, I think when I first graduated, I was like, the more people I have in LinkedIn, the better. And I am at 4,000, which it feels like a lot. But I'm like, a lot of those people I, try my best to keep in touch with and have really meaningful relationships with, that I know I can call on if, for their services, or for them, just chat with them and know more about their lives and see what they're up to, and vice versa.
Amazing. Joel, what questions and thoughts do you have, my friend? Because I know I've been talking a lot, so
I'm used to it by now. I'm used to it by now. I've known you for years. I've given up a long time ago trying to find your off switch.
Well, that's why every now and then.
I love it when it does that, though. Yeah. When StreamYard does it for me, that's amazing.
So do you have a question there?
I got too many.
Just one will do.
That would help if I could actually remember it.
See the cogs are turning.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
I need an update on my operating system.
So while you think there, Joel, Sydney, for those that are watching this and wondering about how to go about asking for help in the workplace, because I find that's quite a sensitive subject for a lot of people. They're not quite sure how to go about asking for help. And you've mentioned a few things about not only the accommodations, but also that HR should be trained or should have a way to be able to deal with this. What is the best? Let's talk small business. Less than 50 employees first. What are your suggestions to individuals that are working with an organization and need that additional help, and how to go about it?
Yeah, I think a lot. It's hard to ask for help, but I think a lot of people think. I think this goes hand for both the small businesses and large businesses as a whole. Starting with small business, but I think realizing. I think a lot of people want help when the problem's already done. So, for example, already having issues on the job for like more than a month, right, or longer, or when you start a new job task. For example, let's say an employee starts a new job, has a task, and because sometimes it's busy, it's a busy work environment. The manager drops you off the job, and you start doing the job task and the job duties, and you're like, wait, were you fully trained on that? What to do? Do you have the tools you need? And then when you, for example, that first day or that first week, maybe if you want to try figuring it out within that first week of figuring out, okay, it's still not working, bring it up to your manager, to human resources, and be like, hey, I'm struggling with this. I don't, I need more support. And then if you get that support, actually, if you figure out, okay, this is what to do, and you find out, okay, that solved the problem, great. But if you continue having issues, or you think, hey, if I had an accommodation of getting up and moving around a little bit, or having that mental break, for a little bit, or having the use of it for even itself, having so many job tasks and so many job duties, and being told verbal instructions instead of when you prefer written instructions, it's like what was the next task I had to do, and so. Instead having a checklist, having a to-do list, asking that from your manager or your HR, or, asking them if they don't want to give you that, or, instead being like, okay, can you talk slower so I can actually write down what the next steps are? Usually, though, I say to, for example, have it sent in an email that we can refer back to it later as well, and realizing that it's like, hey, and being transparent and open to your manager. I want to do my best work. I'm here to do my best work. This is what I need. And so I need that checklist to be able to, okay, I finished a task, I can move on to the next one without coming to you constantly, be like, what's the next one again? And so reframing it like that, and in setting yourself, being proactive in your success.
I think, just listening to that and my experience and working with many, many corporates over the years, and seeing how things have changed over the last 20, 25 years with regards to, it's not like neurodiversity is a new thing. It's just only now being dealt with and understood better. And 15, 20 years ago, there wasn't any of this additional assistance or help, or it was everybody. It was very much a cookie cutter kind of conveyor belt type environment within work. And one of the sad things that I think is still apparent today is that only when it comes to your like productivity review or your
Mm-hmm.
work review process is when a lot of people feel they need to bring out that, hey, I need help, but by then it's too
Mm-hmm.
late. When it comes up to your probation review or something like that,
Yeah.
Yeah.
what I'm hearing is just be proactive from the beginning, let them know, ask for help, and explain you're trying to do your best work, and in order to do that, these are the things they're going to assist you to get there. Because guess what, your employer wants you to do your best work too. Um,
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
so by
And on
bringing
the
that out early.
yeah, with that too, I would even say that's like performance management, which is a component of human resources. And
Yeah.
so like performance reviews, and even that's on the managers too. When they also wait until someone's been struggling to be like, hey, you've been doing it wrong the whole time. You need the manager and the human resources need to be proactive. Like, hey, is everything okay? Do you need anything from us? Is it, for example, I always give the example of someone that's has depression, right? And so if someone's in a depressed episode, might not be able to function as well as when they're not in that depressive episode. And so you see this person, hey, they're not performing as well as they were 2 months ago. Let me check in on this person and see if it's a technical issue. Is it they're going through something? We're human beings, we're not robots, even though. And so it's like, okay, what is the underlying issue? And again, I think it's on both the employee and the employers to be proactive.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's and I'm conscious those anybody that's watching, whether you're watching this live or watching the
Yes.
replay, if you have any
Mhm.
questions, do drop them into the comments so that we can share those or respond to them either while we are live or afterwards. But also let us know where you're joining us from. We'd love to know. Um,
I
but
also take issue with people who call themselves experts, and they do make them. It is funny that they do call themselves experts when they don't actually have anything neurodivergent about
well,
them whatsoever. Yet
well,
somehow they are experts and we are not.
Well, I get that. I mean, one of the things that I loved is when we were going through the pandemic, all of a sudden everybody was an expert at helping you set up your Zoom. Everybody was
Mhm.
a
Yeah.
online live audio expert, and but the reality is we've got. I think we've got to realize that we're always learning,
Yes.
and
Mhm.
this is an evolving landscape, and Canada, US, UK,
Mhm.
even if you take the top people in
Mhm.
on the subject in each one of those countries, they're going to be at a totally different level and conversation level based on their own personal experience and the adaptation
Mhm.
or adaptations within organizations to uh, take time and look at how things are being done. And this is one of the things that I've said to Joel before. I think also with AI,
Many
where AI
times.
is going now, is
Mhm.
once we get to a stage where we can connect the dots for all the different organizations around the world, because you get some amazing work that's getting done on a very local level within a community, as an
Mhm.
example, which isn't, and they're having great success, but that's not being shared with large
Mhm.
organizations or with people in other countries where if we can take the successes from all the different places around the world, put that into one bank of information, how quickly we could really make get on leaps and bounds with helping individuals and supporting them and being able to if we can um, make the individual's environment more supportive and accessible in a way that they can learn faster and therefore the productivity, whether it be for the organization or for their own business, goes
Mhm.
up, then just imagine where we could be in 2, 3, 5, 10 years from now.
Yeah, to your point, Joel, some people are like, oh, I'm reaching out to you because I hear you're an expert on neurodiversity. Like, I am. But news to me, I've just, my experience and what I've learned, and I'm very transparent that I'm always learning and growing, and I try to know as much as I possibly can. But again, I'm only human, and some days I'll forget the things I recently learned or forget the old things. And so instead, I'm like, I am an individual that's passionate about this area and progressing this work forward, but I'm not an expert by any means. And I think, but I feel like for like social media and like LinkedIn to make it, we like the flashy things, right? And so being like, oh, I'm the expert, I can help you and to get those sales. People look for that keyword expert, right? And so it's reframing, what does an expert actually mean? Are they continuously learning and growing and reframing? And so what does it actually look like? Do they have the lived experience? Do they not have that lived experience? What is their background? What is their experiences? And being open and transparent that we don't all know it all.
Absolutely. And that's the beauty is, because we don't know it all these conversations that we have give us opportunities to expand and learn and bring communities together as well. Joel, did you have a question there?
No, I didn't. I was nodding in agreement.
Okay. Sydney, I mean, what questions do you have for our audience, or are you trying to get answered within your, like day-to-day mission of what you're trying to accomplish?
Yeah, I think what I want to know those diverse perspectives on this, really understanding that I have my lived experience. What is your lived experience? What is your relation to neurodiversity and disability and accessibility? And knowing that knowing that proximity and also how, and knowing where people are in their journey and to know where people want to go, and also realizing, okay, who are also doing this work that's similar to mine, and that I can echo and voice and encourage and have people reach out to them too as well. And I think having other collaborators and having people that realize that there needs to be a better global community. Like I feel like this, like, and sometimes it's funny. I go on LinkedIn and after talking to someone, and I'm like, oh, they would be a good connection. Oh, they're already connected to that person, and vice versa. They want to connect me with someone, but even then, it's like, okay, how can we? Like kind of individually, again, there's individually connected, but how can we be more globally connected? There's different time zones. Like again, you guys are at your nighttime. I'm about to be at 4 p.m. You're about to be at 9 p.m. And so there's quite a time zone difference there. But realizing to make that time to can have these conversations with each other and to learn from each other and realize how it impacts us and know that the work is actually moving forward.
Absolutely. I mean, the fact that there is, firstly, that we're having this conversation, giving people that the hope that things are going to get better, but also showing that things are progressing. Because there are a lot of people, the more we have these conversations, the more we realize that there are more and more people that don't know what they don't know. So, one of the conversations that we had last year, no, the year before, January, we were talking about just, what is neurodiversity, and so many people in corporates and really intelligent people from around the world that we thought would, it would just be common knowledge, hadn't even heard the word neurodiversity, and that blew us away. And we had somebody who was listening in, and they went, "Oh, so like autism." And through listening on the talk show that we were on, then went, oh well, I wish they had something like that, that kind of service or support in my local city. And somebody else who was listening in, saw where on LinkedIn where she was based and went, hey, let's connect and reach out, because actually there's an office less than an hour from from where you live. And this woman, I mean, it blew my mind, because during COVID, her daughter dropped off her 4-year-old son, who was autistic nonverbal, and all of a sudden, this woman had to stop working to support this 4-year-old child, her grandson, and didn't know that there was actually local community help and support. Her daughter wasn't coping, so just left. Um, so we were sitting there, realizing that by having these conversations, somebody who was able to be in a position to help could hear about it and make that impact and make that introduction right away. And we were just sitting, here in the UK, having a conversation, thinking, well, I wish there was somebody who can help, and somebody was listening. So by us having more and more of these conversations, my motto has always been, you never know where a conversation may lead. And somebody might be watching this replay 3 weeks, 6 weeks from now and go, hold on, I didn't realize, let's get in touch. So that's why I love the fact that we're able to broadcast this onto so many different places, and you just don't know when people are going to watch. So I guess, Sydney, a question for you. If you had 3 pieces of advice for the person who needs the help as a neurodivergent in the workplace, one as an employer who has neurodivergent in the workplace that they need to help, and then lastly, where you would like to see progress within neurodivergent support on a global scale, because you mentioned that networking, but being able to take it on a global scale. What would your one piece of advice be for each of those? Hopefully,
so I think I'm gonna have to have you repeat that. But so I think for the employee that needs the help, that again, the employer just wants you to do your best, and so if you need supports and need accommodations to do your best, and you feel again, and I think also if you feel safe enough to do so, because safety is such a huge component, and so if you feel safe and feel like you need these tools and these accommodations and support to do your best, then ask for that help from your employer, and from human resources, but only when you feel safe. For employers, I think again, telling them to create those safe environments and realize that, you can create what you think is a safe environment, but really taking that step back and really listening to your employees to help and having them have an active role in that safe environment and creating that inclusive environment. Because, what you said, Mac, you don't know what you don't know. And so instead, really listening to your employees and listening to what they have to say, to create those environments. And then I think on the global scale is that I think the advice I have is that we need to all connect more and have more conversations and have. I was talking to someone else. I talked to a couple people about this. We need an online hub, global hub, to where we can all connect at different times. But realizing that, because like so many people, I'm like, I feel like I can make a decent network now with all the people I know that is doing similar work around the world. I just don't have the capacity to do that, frankly, but I would love to. But more people are interested in actually having that global hub where we can all connect at different times and really connect with each other, and being open to connect and open to also that. I think also advice I've given is that yes, we have similar perspectives and experiences, but we're all not going to agree all the time, and that's okay. But not to be rude about it, be like, oh, that's your experience, that's valid, this is my experience. And so, because I've seen, for example, on LinkedIn, people fighting in the comments about the terminology that's being used. And I'm like, we're literally fighting against each other. We should be fighting the system. But so instead, realizing that we all have different lived experiences and perspectives on this. And so instead realizing, okay, what are we fighting for? What do we want by doing this work? We all have, I think we all kind of all have the same kind of collective goal in this little different goals within that. And so instead, realizing, okay, how can we best actually collaborate with each other and on a global scale?
I think, Joel, we're definitely going to have a word, my friend, when we see each other again, because this whole global,
That's on Friday.
this is true. I tell you what, Joel will just hold me down to that minute. But the big vision around Rockstar X has always been about educating people around neurodiversity, empowering people in the workplace, bringing different organizations together that can encourage this conversation. And I know there's, like, in the UK we have the annual autistic show, and then there's
National
the
Autistic Show, yes.
National Autistic Show. There's all different events around the world that are for a part of neurodiversity, if that makes sense. But bringing all these different organizations and these thought leaders in the space together to have a look at how do we share, not necessarily share each other's resources, but how do we improve resources, have these discussions so that we know what's available out there. Because as an example, somebody like yourself, if you came across somebody in somewhere in Africa or somewhere in Europe that has a way to improve customer or employee engagement or employee productivity or accessibility in the workplace somehow, and they had a tool available that could literally change how somebody works, and you didn't know about it, then it's somebody losing out that opportunity to work at their best, and giving their best. So by bringing these different organizations together and sharing ideas, and hearing where people are going and having some arguments, it's okay, because differences of opinion is what helps us progress, but not necessarily fighting over the details of, like you say in the comments when they talk about different terminology. That's not, the terminology is not what's going to help the outcome at the end of the day. So I definitely think we need to embrace that and watch the space, see how we make that happen, and start bringing some thought leaders from around the world into a global space where we can facilitate that in some way.
Way ahead of you, Mac.
So Sydney, how do we help you, and how can people reach out to you? What is the perfect type of your organization that you are able to help right now that we can kind of let people know about, so that they can share that and scream it from the hilltops, so that you can make more of a difference?
Yeah, I think like right now it's like a lot of small to medium-sized organizations across various sectors, but that has a human resource team that realizes that they're not doing the best in this space, or that they want to continue improving their work in the space. And so, for example, even HR professionals in companies that want to look at their policies and procedures, see if there's any gaps for inclusion in neurodiversity and accessibility and disability inclusion, and then people connect with me on my website. And so there's a contact form there if you're interested in even just having a conversation, to continue this conversation. You can follow me on LinkedIn at Sydney Elaine Butler, and then also Instagram at Accessible Creates.
Awesome stuff. I thought your mouth was moving there, Joel. I thought you were going to say something, and I wasn't. So I was like, do I keep quiet? Do I shut up?
That's your phone that was making the noise, not me.
No, I was watching your lips move. Elaine, we'll definitely make sure that we share that. And if you're watching this and you think that there's somebody that needs to know about what Elaine's doing and the work that she's doing, go and drop some comments into the comments on the event. Let us know, any questions that you have. Tag some people that you want to introduce, because you never know where a conversation is going to go, and you may just, have come across this accidentally in your feed and thought, oh, what's this all about? Clicked on it and you're listening, and then all of a sudden you kind of going, hold on, I actually know somebody that might be interested in this, and it might be a far, stretch, but drop it in there. You just never know. I've recently had some bizarre conversations that, had it not been for somebody just going and dropping a comment going, hey, Mac, do you know so-and-so? And I'm like, oh my goodness, how did you? And then we found out through all these things, and timing sometimes is everything. So, go and comment, let us know, drop any questions for Sydney into the comments, and let us know if you want to be involved in, that kind of global agenda around neurodiversity and trying to make an impact, start some conversations, collaborate, bring some resources together. Let us know as well. Drop that in the comments or reach out to Joel, myself, or Sydney, and let's see where that conversation may go. Joel, over to you.
Thank you, Mac. And the time is flown, literally. Yes, I've been sitting way too long. Just and looking forward to seeing you all in season 4, and hopefully see you all very soon as well. Those of you who are anywhere near New York area, we'll be doing our own version of Coming to America, not the rude one.
Absolutely. I will try screaming from the windows and the rooftops and see if there's an echo, though. Amazing.
Yes, well.
Sydney, it's been an absolute pleasure meeting you virtually, face to face. But who knows? Maybe we will meet face to face someday. And thank you so much for spending this hour with us, answering questions, telling us about your journey, and giving the advice that you have.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.